I don't believe in this philosophy really, but I know that it was going to be done eventually. Is there a worst Joestar? I'll be trying to figure that out, but what metrics are we going to be basing this on? You can't power scale writing elements, but I think many do it anyways. So I'll try to be as honest as possible with this. So here are the metrics we'll be using. Narrative execution, meaning arc resolution and how well their character coincides with it being character development. Next is character consistency, being their internal logic and believability. And next we have functional power, be it their problem solving abilities or effectiveness in combat. After that, I'd also like to factor in what I'm going to be calling dynamic interest, because alongside consistency, there's what makes people enjoy a character. The character being dynamic could be on, subverting expectations, moral complexity, internal conflicts and contradictions, and unpredictability and innovation. Now, people can have their own interpretations. I already disagree with most on the quality of Golden Wind, and I'd like to point out that the worst in this case doesn't exactly mean bad. Well, let's first focus on the three metrics. So first, we have Jonathan Joestar. His narrative execution is straightforward. His goal, from what I understand of his character, is simply to be better, and he's allowed to do so. So working on becoming a man and a true gentleman guides everything that he does, all the way from when he had been showing compassion to Erina when she had been getting bullied to his final sacrifice against Dio. Now, this arc concluded with his death, but it's a resolution that ties directly back to his character's values. He believed that he had done all that he could for the world and died most likely thinking that both him and Dio would have ended it there. His consistency is probably his strongest point, as Jonathan never wavers from being noble. He keeps his kindness and protective instincts throughout Phantom Blood, and his motivations have remained the same from the beginning to the end. The motivation being to protect others and uphold some sort of justice. For functional power, Jonathan gets the job done. He's been down but not out with his level of adaptation. He masters Hamon, defeats Dio initially, and with or without Hamon, he does handle the zombie threats effectively. And for being a journey modeled from these Victorian time stories, Jonathan fits that model of good versus evil narrative and represents everything noble about the Joestar bloodline. Many would call him simple, but that simplicity serves the story's needs. Now, before we go any further, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you're enjoying the content. And also, tell me which style of reading the script do you guys like, because a lot of people don't think that I am script reading. I usually am. The difference is the liberties that I take. So, for example, we're going to go on to Joseph Joestar with my other side of script reading. Now, next we have Joseph Joestar. Now, similar to Jonathan Joestar, his actions are based on his desire to protect his loved ones, but on top of that, he mixes in a lot of his own self-love and unseriousness. With both things in mind, he will do anything necessary to where we get both to exist. And I do mean anything, because Joseph is the one that's willing to do what's unbelievable and juvenile alongside being one of the greatest battle tacticians to do it. The truth is, he's a Sherlock Holmes character within JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Now, the first question is, okay, is he consistent? If Joseph isn't acting like Joseph, then he's dead or incapable of doing so. Every decision he's made and any way he's acted is in character with what we have established. The only difference is age and what he's able to do. I think it's all in character, but the most polarizing thing he's done that many people just see as not Joseph is cheating on his wife. My issue isn't that he did it once. If we're going to go all in on Joseph being a self-serving guy with not much regard for the people around him, but still loving them to death, then there has to be more than just Josuke out there, for being real. But Josuke isn't the only one that we know of. I haven't been confirmed that he never did anything like this or did more, yada yada. So if it looks out of place because of a lack of consistency, then yeah, but most of the things that his character does points to doing this and even more. After this, all of his actions are believable, and he does fit the part's tone. I think that Joseph's core personality is retained even through him maturing, which keeps the believability. He's still the trickster, he's still a Sherlock Holmes, I can see it all. He just leans towards this new Indiana Jones perspective now. But above all that, his personality had been sculpted by his holds and this newfound responsibilities and experiences. Now, does Joseph fit the tone within the part? Well, I think that he isn't like anyone else in what he does. So how does one quantify that? I think the fact of the matter is that Cars was the final villain and he was one of one. Joseph was the protagonist and he was one of one. We're in a situation where two characters drive the plot to work for them, so while someone like Joseph doesn't fit the tone that Cars sets, I feel like that's the point, as he is his opposition. But I guess you could say that he doesn't to make it easier. Now we move on to Jotaro Kujo, our most recognizable Joestar. His narrative execution shows clear growth from the stoic protagonist modeled after Clint Eastwood to a mentor, and then finally to a father. While he maintains that stoicism throughout, his character page that wasn't really addressed in the anime has shown us that this stoic thing is a front, to be honest with you. A strong one too. And we do get a better scope of it because once we see his performance in the two parts, you're thinking, well, maybe there is a bit more to Jotaro than I expected. Now, most people consider Jotaro the best JoJo character because he's the most present throughout the series. No matter what role he takes on, he delivers. So, what are we working with here? Character consistency is one of Jotaro's strongest aspects. He retains that stoicism that we know him for while building on everything else that makes him who he is. The core of his character never wavers even as he grows into different roles. Now for functional power, Star Platinum had carried Jotaro through much of part 3, but as the series progressed, we see them working together more as Jotaro's tactical mind had developed. His execution becomes increasingly impressive, showing that he's not just brute force, but strategic thinking. Okay, moving on to Josuke Higashikata from Diamond is Unbreakable. His narrative execution is built around being a protector of his hometown rather than being a world-saving hero. Unlike Jonathan's noble hero's journey and Joseph's large adventure, Josuke's arc is about maintaining peace in Morio and dealing with stand users who do threaten that peace. His biggest test comes with Kira, where he has to step up from handling general threats to facing someone who had been generationally dangerous. The resolution of part 4 ties directly into his character. He saves his town not through exactly raw power, but through working with others as a community to take care of these issues and using his abilities effectively. Character consistency is also a JoJo strong point here with Josuke. From start to finish, Josuke maintains a protective nature towards everyone, especially when it comes to those that are his family and friends. His anger over his hair never stops being a defining trait, but underneath that running gag, he's also still consistently kind to people that need help and absolutely ruthless to those who do hurt innocent people. We also don't lose his teenage personality where he is vain. He's vain, to be fair. He does gossip and he has great moments. His favorite moments are with his friends. He's alongside Jolyne in being one of the most normal Joestars when the heat is off. And for functional power, Crazy Diamond works perfectly for Josuke in his role for the story. The restoration ability isn't just about healing, he uses it creatively in combat, turning broken glass into projectiles, or restoring objects in the way that traps enemies. And above all of this, the fact that he can't heal himself adds real stakes to his fights and makes it extremely more relatable. When combined with his tactical thinking, Crazy Diamond is just a very versatile stand. Now, while this is before we get into the whole dynamic interest area for all of the Joestars, I do want to address a certain thing that we should be noticing this far into the video, which is not really that far at all. All of these characters really do have extremely similar traits in terms of functional power, in terms of character consistency, and multiple things. So I want to ask the question here. Can you subscribe? Leave a like? No, I'm kidding. It's not that. I want to ask the question here. What is it that you don't like about the Joestars above everything? Because before we get to this conclusion and all, I do want to think about a potential second part of the video where we address certain comments about how this reason is why I don't like this character. This reason is why I don't like this one. Because I feel as though when I do look at it fairly objectively, a lot of them hold extremely similar traits, and it's just more so about how does it connect to their real world scenario and how it all differs from each other, you know? That's the main thing. But again, I would like to reinforce this. Please make sure to leave a comment about this. What exactly do you not like about the Joestar that you don't like? Or maybe even all of them if you do have certain things that are like that. But going on to the next one. Now, Giorno Giovanna is probably the most debated Joestar of all time in terms of quality. His narrative execution follows the infiltration and eventual takeover of Passione to become a gangstar and also stopping the drug dealing to children specifically. His arc takes him from an outsider with the gang world around him to someone who had been fully enveloped in the world and bended it towards the reality that he had wanted. His development shows him learning about leadership, the complexities of power, and what it really takes to change things from within. His transformation from a lonely child who believed himself to be, the scum of the earth, to the leader of Passione feels extremely earned through everything that he does throughout part 5. Now, is Giorno Giovanna consistent? Well, Giorno works with a pretty clear moral framework where he values life, he despises those who prey on the innocent, especially children, and believes in earned respect. His core motivations remain clear throughout, but the methods that he's willing to use change more than the other Joestars do. Now, as for his functional power, Giorno works great. His genius lies not in just Gold Experience's versatility, but how he applies it. Against Illuso, he infects himself with Purple Haze's virus only with the idea that he might be able to come back from this. It's a solution that's both self-sacrificial and strategically genius. One thing, he couldn't figure out where to work when facing Gyachao, but I think that's good. The reason being is showing off that you do have the ability to fail, which makes a character a lot more believable. Now, Giorno also has a good understanding of psychology as he's able to diffuse certain confrontations while maintaining dignity of both parties. That's against Bruno, that's against Abakio, that's against Koichi. It's the people that aren't evil. Now next we have Jolyne Cujoh, our first woman JoJo protagonist. Her narrative execution takes her from a forsaken youth looking for familiarity in a home structure to a determined force fighting to save both her father and the universe itself. The arc starts with her resenting Jotaro for his absence, completely understandable. But her evolution, similar to Josuke in a way, evolves into her becoming the hero who rescues Jotaro and others instead of waiting to be rescued by Jotaro, who is in the part. And that's something he usually likes doing as, oh, I'm the main Joestar. Their dynamic is great as in it's like saving you is saving me and you saving me is saving you. Who has a parent dynamic like that? It's amazing. Now, character consistency is also strong with Jolyne as she maintains that confrontational attitude and strong will throughout the story, but develops emotional maturity and more strategic thinking as she faces greater enemies. Her relationship with Jotaro evolves naturally as she does come to understand sacrifice. It doesn't completely absolve Jotaro of his issues, but in being a stand user world now, it's more understandable than before. Now, functional power-wise, Stone Free is incredibly versatile. And while being the daughter of Jotaro, she's more similar to Josuke and Giorno in that she's extremely applicable with her powers and how she's able to use the string with, oh, I'm able to turn it into a mesh, I'm turning it into a Mobius strip, I'm able to sew myself up and be naturally flexible. But one huge thing that I see that is somewhat similar to Giorno but has more issues with it, as in like she puts herself through more self-sacrificial issues, is the fact that she can unravel 70% of her body and she's put herself on the line to that extent and has no ways of reconstructing her body in the way that Giorno could. It's like Josuke's level of risk with Giorno's level of versatility. And this is a thought that I had came to when I had first finished Stone Ocean. The idea is that Araki does improve his execution from Joestar to Joestar. There is certain things that he will remove and put back into the characters purely because, oh, this holds more weight. This gives you more stakes. And I do believe that there is a very visible escalation in terms of writing quality for these characters, but the reason as to why I don't really count anyone out is because of how they interact within their world and how much it matters. We still have to cover 7 and 8, but I do want to make the point here because I want to reinforce the idea that, hey, look, this is going to be a pretty nuanced topic. We have someone like Jonathan, who if you do look at in comparison to everyone that we have here, Jonathan is most likely the most consistent Joestar by far. The thing is, that doesn't necessarily mean that he is inherently above all of them just because he's consistent as a character. But yes, the point is made. Now, moving on to Johnny Joestar from Steel Ball Run, we see arguably the most complex Joestar psychologically speaking. His narrative execution transformed him from a broken negative man seeking zero, essentially wanting to become nothing, to someone who had found meaning through friendship and love. The Steel Ball Run race becomes his journey towards redemption and self-worth. The character consistency with Johnny is interesting because his dark determination and selfishness still does remain constant, but they're getting funneled towards increasingly noble and better intentioned goals. He starts wanting the corpse parts for just his selfish reasons, but ends up fighting for others. The consistency in his personality combined, with his shifting goals makes his development feel a lot more human and genuine. Now, as for his functional power, I think that's also a combination of his growth and decision making and execution through Tusk's evolution. Each act is a mirror towards Johnny's character development, from his basic nail bullets to these reality breaking infinite rotation. The way the stand grows with Johnny creates one of the most satisfying power progressions in JoJo. Now we're going on into the story of Josuke 8 in JoJolion. The story of Josuke 8 is centered around self-discovery as a fusion of two people trying to create their own identity, his own identity. Rather than following a traditional hero's journey, he's piecing together who he is while navigating this complex relationship with the Higashikata family dynamics and his outside relationships. As for his character development, his growth is essentially being an adult newborn. There's no real way to say it besides that, and he's extremely confused, but he still has his passive investigation going on as he's navigating his once-was world to being a person who is actively determined on who he is and standing on who he is. The point is also strengthened when he shifts from just following clues to actively pursuing what's going on and what are his issues. That goes all the way to the hospital and talking about pursuing. We're going on to Wonder of You, and this is pursuing despite certain danger. It's an evolution of his character from reacting to mystery and being a bit more passive to making decisions, acting, and taking control of his destiny, which reflects his journey from lost identity to self-determination despite the struggles of this new world. Now, as for his character consistency, I believe that it works different here because while Josuke maintains his determination, he's trying to develop his own personality. That's separate from both Kira and Josefumi. So I'd say that he's consistent in the decisions that he's made, as any mistakes that he's made is a mistake he'd make. And he's consistent not in decisions, but his character being the one making decisions, which is what we're looking for. That's truly what character consistency is. I'd say his behavior remains consistent too. I think for the most part he's nice, and specific areas where he's sort of past his amnesia also makes sense, while he's showing emotional connections to people like Holly without understanding why, and while he's also maintaining caution with the Higashikata household. They're people that should be family. He's tapping into this other side. He can say, I don't know why I'm doing this, but that's consistent to the readers because, damn, he doesn't know anything. After that, I think his selective violence follows a clear pattern like it does with Giorno and Johnny. Essentially, it's restraint when possible. Examples being asking permission before pursuing people related to the family or the family itself, and lethal force when loved ones are threatened, which is essentially all the Joestars realistically. As for his functional power, through Soft and Wet, I think Josuke learns a lot of himself. The Bubble's abilities start with plunder, and that's simple, but they develop new properties as the story progresses, as it's meant to reflect his growth and understanding of his new self, familiar to essentially Johnny, Koichi, the act stands, and pretty much everybody else that you see really developing their stands. And he consistently uses his stand's versatility to solve not just his fight issues, but even just like non-combat, because you can cause diversions, protect yourself, and honestly sometimes have fun, which shows a lot. Now that was everything that we needed to go for in terms of the regular character stuff. Now we're going to be going through all the Joestars again, but specifically talking about their X factor here, the factor that people are interested, the dynamic interest category that I was talking about earlier. And again, the following guidelines we'll be looking at are how they subvert expectations, moral complexity, because everyone's interested in that, of course, internal conflicts and contradictions, and unpredictability and innovation. So starting this back up with Jonathan Joestar, while I don't think Jonathan Joestar has subverted my expectation, that's because I've seen this franchise 1,000 times. When I first seen him, I had an appreciation for this type of old writing that he had going for him. And I think at this point, with how many of a type of a popular series that we've seen, and how there's always bad guys turning good guys and good guys turning bad guys, it's all era based. I think a type like Jonathan can be a nice refresher, but it depends on where we're at in a time. As for his moral complexities and internal conflicts, well, this correlates with his relationship with Dio more so. I don't think that Jonathan is Jonathan without Dio being Dio. He doesn't know how to feel about Dio since he's never had a brother and Dio is such a large portion of his life, but at the same time, Dio has committed too many atrocities to be left alone. And in addition to that, Dio plans to take out Jonathan. He plans to take over the entire thing. So there's this inevitable feeling of both dread and fear that Jonathan has to tackle, but still does despite these feelings. That says a lot for his agency, urgency. He's just great in knowing that, damn, something has to be done. As for his unpredictability and innovation, as this is a battle manga, him and the rest of the Joestars will be talking about their powers and applications when it comes to this area. If I had to talk about unpredictability for someone else on how hard it is and how it's supposed to be, and more so, if you're a character with a lot of interesting unpredictability, I'd probably refer to Killua or Hisoka in Hunter x Hunter, if you wanted an easy example that's animated. But on Jonathan, he's great with his adaptability and applications of his Hamon. Past that, I don't have much. Now, going on into Joseph Joestar, Joseph consistently does something wild to outdo his opponents. That's what makes him interesting. We come to expect something unexpected, knowing his resolution will succeed with minimal losses. But is Joseph morally complex? Not really. He's just more humanized than Jonathan. His deep loyalty to his family and his drive to protect them remain constant throughout his story. I'd say what defines him is his innovation. He's extremely perceptive and inventive in every situation that he's in. But past that, I'm not sure. But since I'm going to be making a note about Anasui later when I'm talking about Jolyne, keep note of this Joseph part for when that happens over there. Now, his unpredictability, that's all in his tactics. But I don't think his character is unpredictable. We all know who Joseph is, but we never know what he'll do next in terms of what he's capable of. The tension makes him fun to watch. And it's not really whether he'll win. It's about how, because he'll be surprising us with the method. So that will be his unpredictability. Now, let's look to Jotaro. He subverts expectations in his later appearances. I think parts 4 and 6 show us sides that we really couldn't have imagined from part 3. While early part 3 set him up as this punch guy, his intelligence became the trait that had elevated his character. Now, Jotaro's moral compass is also straightforward, as he sees the world in black and white. Evil means that you use the weak for your own gain, and the justice thing is to stomp on them. The simple morality, it's fitting him completely. Now, his internal conflicts, that I feel comes more with part 6, as his absence as a father creates that contradiction. He stays away to protect Jolyne from the dangers that he brings. Now, this also brings a lot of tension for his character, and I feel like someone probably wants me to make a note of Jotaro trying to navigate Joseph's relationships in part 4, and I don't necessarily see that as like an internal conflict. I think Jotaro knows that, yeah, this guy messed up and oh my god, I have to deal with this in this way. And it makes him uncomfortable, but I think that's because Jotaro doesn't want to deal with any of that type of stuff. That isn't really an internal conflict, that's an external conflict. As for his unpredictability, I think Jotaro's on-the-fly usage of Star Platinum shows he has genius level thinking, and how he handles his enemies will impress the many. But all Joestars show innovation, so this isn't exactly unique to him in terms of this area. As for Josuke in 4, does he subvert expectations? Well, without the context of fighting, I'll say that I was surprised to see him being cold to Joseph. He has every right to be. I didn't expect a Joestar to act like this, towards family. So I think that it's good that he recognizes his own person. And I think that people don't understand that Josuke is actually trying to hit himself with exposure therapy a lot when it comes to facing his fears. So something like that, I feel like that's adjacent into standing up for yourself. And while it's like, oh, I can't accept this guy who hasn't been in my life at all. The right thing to do is, hey, look, he hasn't put in towards the effort to do anything. So I'm gonna stay back a little bit. That says a lot. And I do think that's unexpected. But that's, if someone wants to disagree, fine. But I'd say his first introduction in certain moments where he seems weirder than expected also showed more of his humanity. As for the unpredictable factor, his unpredictability mostly appears in how he solves his problems, the creativity being in ways that he handles these stand users in part 4. Tactically, I'd say he's surprising. Personality-wise, not too much. This makes the early parts of Diamond is Unbreakable feel different, which honestly, it might turn some people away. Going on into Giorno Giovanna, I'd say that it's hard to see Golden win without the context of previous parts, but I don't think Giorno had established expectations that he didn't meet. His moral complexity comes from working within a criminal organization to achieve good goals. He's simultaneously confident and modest in terms of personality, calculating and instinctive, cold, warm, you get the idea? Giorno is closer to a morally gray character like Johnny than most Joestars, and being both Jonathan and Dio reflects this duality well. I think Jotaro has the actions of a Jonathan with the mood of a Dio archetype, meanwhile Giorno is a Dio with the philosophy of a Jonathan. This leads to Giorno being extremely brutal towards his enemies while remaining pretty compassionate to everybody else. Now, as for Jolyne in Stone Ocean, being the first woman JoJo brings this fresh perspective while maintaining the core Joestar determination and moral compass. Jolyne subverts expectations by becoming the Joestar savior, being Jotaro's rescuer and holding it down. The expectations past that, I'm not sure. She's the only other Joestar besides Jonathan and Joseph to have had relationships actively be a part of the story. And as for what it served, I think a lot of people can say that, hey, she didn't kill Romeo, but I say appreciate that because it could have gotten worse. Now her moral complexity shows in her willingness to destroy her enemies while showing compassion and restraint for allies and confused opponents. Foo Fighters could have easily been annihilated, but Jolyne understands sometimes the indifferent can be manipulated into being the enemy, and maybe you can pull them from that. I can also say that Anasui being around despite what he's done. I mean, look, we have Abakio, Caesar, Okuyasu. Okuyasu could have been a murderer, and there are some weirdos in part 4 in general. So while I do want to leave the moral complexity to their actions, I think that since redemption is a large point for all of the JoJos than who they have around, I think we're made to believe that as the reader, these characters can be better than their actions were. There's a large difference in someone with bad actions, someone who chooses to be evil, and an evil person being promoted and uplifted for being evil. We know Dio is wrong for what he does, and him being around isn't that's not a pat on the back for a longevity character. So yeah. After that, her internal conflicts drive her character arc forward. She has no reason to trust the other prisoners, while also she doesn't even have reasons to trust herself at times. She's like, oh my gosh, what's going on? She loves Jotaro despite resenting his absence, and wants and proclaims her independence while fighting to save him. Her unpredictability shows in how she uses her abilities, the creativity she brings with her combat and street smarts and being a tactical genius. I think other unpredictability could be personality-wise, but nothing that will shock you too much, I think, in terms of the Joestars, besides her first introduction, I'll say. Now we have Johnny Joestar in part 7. He's dealing with depression, guilt, family trauma while pursuing power. The way he subverts expectations is remarkable, starting as arguably the most selfish JoJo, but developing into someone willing to sacrifice everything for love. His moral complexity is clear, with his willingness to harm innocent people for gain early on, but eventually fighting to protect those that he loves. His internal contradictions being that he wants to overcome his negative karma while using negative means, seeking redemption through increasingly more negative, violent acts. Johnny's unpredictability actually is really well due to the fact that he is a morally ambiguous Joestar, so his actions with other characters are largely based on how valuable they can be to the Johnny's character and development of his goals. Now, Josuke A in JoJolion is also unique, as he's someone with amnesia fighting for identity rather than justice or goals. Well, he gets to that in the end. But he subverts expectations by not fighting a clear villain, but navigating the complex family dynamics and conspiracies going on around him. Unlike the other JoJos who are built on their family traits, Josuke 8 has to create his own heroic identity from scratch. His quest isn't about defeating evil exactly, but understanding what does it mean to be himself. His moral complexity shows in his willingness to kill to protect loved ones, while showing restraint when possible, sort of like everybody else. He questions his own nature, though, as a fusion, wondering what this means for his identity and relationships. The pursuit of the Lokakaka raises questions about who deserves healing and at what cost. His internal conflicts are the entire part, so I think that's pretty straightforward. He's dealing with the ethics of being a fusion, both personalities, past obligations, current relationships, all of it. And he has to essentially relearn ethics as this newborn adult. It's crazy. And his unpredictability, besides his bubbles, I'd say is the fact that he adapts so well psychologically, because he doesn't have a personality to be stuck on. He can be competitive with Jobin, he can be ruthless with Damo, he's playing Daya's game when he has to, but this is like chameleon-like adaptation. He's great with improvising a lot of the time. So with all things considered, I feel like the outcome that comes out of this is based on one's value and what someone places on their character story. If what around you values the entertainer more than the wholesome, trustworthy man, then you're going to be going to Joseph over Jonathan every time. If you value thematic value, humanity, while maintaining somewhat of an entertaining factor, I think you get past Joseph in part 2, probably value the entirety of Joseph more, or just move on to someone like the Joestars of parts 3 through 8. And your choice on one of those 5 will be based on what you enjoy in terms of personality. The personality of, I like it real, raw stuff. I like aura. You'll usually choose Jotaro, Giorno, or Johnny. If you get past that point, you'll appreciate Joestars like Jolyne and Josuke 8 more. My thing is, I also feel like Josuke 4 is a lot of the things that a lot of the Joestars are. I think he's like the baseline Joestar, but because Josuke 4 is closer to Johnny and Jolyne than Jotaro and Giorno, then he doesn't get considered a lot. In addition to that, I think he falls by the wayside because he meets everything there in the middle and then some. So because of that, perception-wise, I think the worst Joestar, it's Jonathan or Josuke. But again, really look at it. But with all I've considered, all I've talked about, and you've seen now, how valid would it be that it's one of the two? Honestly, that's your choice. But thank you all for watching. Hopefully I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, peace out and Godspeed.